ourselves. So welcome everybody here to our little Zoom meeting for part of our Maker Stories series. Just a little bit of rules of engagement here today. Since we are in Zoom, I would love if folks could just keep themselves muted so we don't have a lot of that background noise that can sometimes happen since we're all here in this case. Now, today's Maker Stories, we're sitting down with Todd to talk through his beautiful dock that turned into a pack, and now thinking about kind of the evolution of dock to pack making and being able to sit down there with a true maker at heart. As we move through today, there is no such thing as an interruption in our session. So please, at any time, post to chat your questions. I'm keeping a very close eye on that, and I'll be able to lift those up to Todd. And we'll also have plenty of time at the end for questions as well. So what we do in Maker Stories is we sit down with Coda makers and get the story behind a dock. And Todd is a longtime Coda maker, and I'm so excited to have you here with us because you've really been with us for a long time and have grown a lot in that process. And you're just an all-around great person as well. So Todd, for folks who don't know who you are, do you want to just introduce yourself to the crew here today?
Sure. Yeah, well, I'm a little older guy, so I've done a bunch of things during my life. But the things that are most relevant to the pack I'm creating now is I spent a number of years running real estate development projects, and which all required financial analysis. And that's what my the doc that I'm working on, which will become a pack, Time and Money, that's what it's all about, is financial analysis. And I also later, after working in real estate for 5 years, had an app design and development company with my son, Jeremy, and who happens to work for Coda now. And so I also got some design and development experience through that venture. And then most recently, I've been working with my church full time. So and now I'm getting involved in trying to create some packs. So nice. That's quick background.
Yeah, I love it. So when I come to Coda, I'm like, how can I make Jeremy's dad proud? Right? That's the thing. Like, let's make dad proud. So let's start off with the sort of the past. What, for this Time and Money doc that's now turning into a pack, what was the problem that you wanted to solve? Let's kind of lay the groundwork of the background here.
Sure. Well, the financial analysis I had always done in the past was in Excel, in Microsoft Excel, and so working in Excel through the years, creating and working with other people's financial models, I realized there were some key problems with Excel financial models. One is that they're very easy to break. If you've worked with Excel and done anything complex, you know that every cell is independent of all the other cells. And if you put the wrong formula in a cell, or you change a cell temporarily because you want to test something and you forget to change it back, you can have a financial model that shows, you know, millions of dollars of revenue and expenses, and comes up with a internal, you know, with a profitability, internal rate of return or something, and breaking one cell ruins the whole model. And if you don't notice that you broke it, you may think you've got one result when you really don't. So Excel models were too easy to break. That's one big problem. Then also, it's very difficult in Excel to make universal changes, because each cell has its own formula in it. Unless you go through a lot of hoops to make your formulas refer to other formulas and things like that, if you want to change a growth rate across a whole model, you need to reprogram a bunch of cells and make sure that you did that correctly. So making universal changes was really hard. Then also, financial models always relate to time, and it was always difficult. One thing that was really hard to do in the financial models in Excel is if you find out, oh, the design process is going to take 3 months longer than we thought, you have to do a whole bunch of reprogramming to make that change in Excel. And in fact, there were sometimes I would have our analysts, I would say, you know, we have this delay, and they would say, yeah, I'll get back to you tomorrow with a new model. And so I wanted something that made it easy to change time schedules and have it be reflected in the model. So those are some of the big problems. There are a bunch of others, but those are some of the big ones.
Those are the ones that cause the most gray hair and like sleepless
That's right.
nights.
And I got plenty of that.
I'm on my way. I've got a couple just right here. And you know, when you talk about this, and Thomas over in chat saying had to fix a Google sheet recently for the same thing where there's that fragility of the connections, right?
Exactly.
In addition to Excel, were there any other tools that you were using to solve this problem in the past? As part of a stack, anything else along for the ride?
Yeah, not really. There are canned programs, and they do a better job of connecting everything, but they're a lot less flexible. So with Coda, wanted to bring the flexibility and kind of a more structured approach together.
I love that. So how did you discover Coda then?
Well, as our little app business was winding down, Jeremy snagged a job with Coda out in California, and I'm in North Carolina now. We were both in North Carolina, and so I kind of rode along on his journey. He was telling me, he was all excited and was telling me all about Coda, and I always loved the idea of kind of no code development. And because I played around with programming when I was in high school and college, and but I never got deeply enough into it that I could create my own app from start to finish. And so I've always been intrigued by no code type solutions. And Coda sounded like the best one of that kind of genre I'd ever heard. So I got excited about it and started playing around with it as Jeremy got involved in it.
One thing that I think is a really interesting fact is Excel was the biggest programming language as far as usage, right? And I think it's so interesting how, you know, we think about, oh gosh, programming is a totally different skill. Whereas so many of us are really are really talented at some of these things that we don't think of as programming, right? And I just love that it's like, oh, this is like my way in. Fabulous. So let's actually talk now a little bit about when you get the idea for making time and money into a Coda doc. So let's kind of start off with that. Where did that idea come from, and maybe where did you start? And then we can take a look at it as well.
So I kind of realized what some of the big structural elements were that I needed to create. So one element is I wanted to have some global parameters that were easy to set and were very visual, and that would affect the whole model. And Coda has a nice set of on canvas kind of controls like sliders and things like that make it really easy to do that. So I kind of set up a dashboard where the user could set certain parameters that way. Then this whole idea of tying the model to a project schedule was the next big piece. So I created a table that uses Coda's timeline display to visually show a schedule, and that worked just great, because whereas changing one component of the schedule by 3 months, like I said, might take a day to fix in Excel. Now in Coda, I was able to make it so you can just drag the little bar.
I love the slider.
The whole model recalculates, and the whole thing is done instantly. So that was a huge improvement. And so the timeline in Coda really helped with that. And then the next thing that's kind of complex is that I wanted the line items of revenues and expenses and how the cash flows were spread to be done by a formula rather than just plugging numbers into cells. That also makes the model more robust. It's easy to tweak that way and have things recalculate. And so I created a set of cash flow definitions for each line of the model, and that was another table. And then I needed to create a table that brings all that together into the full cash flow model. But it really, since Coda does not natively provide kind of a time series columns where you have month 1, month 2, month 3, etc., and have them linked together. You can't refer to those column headings and so on. I needed to find a way to kind of make that work in Coda. And so so I created kind of a master table that related each revenue or expense item to a date or a period,
Mhm.
and then gave the through the formulas gave the cash flow for each of the for each period. But then essentially each cell in the table was a line in Coda, and I
Yeah.
needed to then bring that all together so that I had the timeline headings across the top. So I used the grouping feature in Coda to make all that happen, so that what you end up with is something where you actually have dates across the top or periods.
Yeah.
And then you have the line items and the right things in the right cells.
Cool.
So that's anyway, that's kind of the way it came together.
Yeah. Could we take a look at it? Would you mind sharing your
Sure.
screen?
Absolutely.
Let's see it in action. And I forget, Todd, is this a published doc? Have you published this one?
Yeah, as a prototype. Yeah, it's published.
Cool. I'm going to pull it up and I'll grab the link for everyone. Also, reminder, folks, you do not have to wait for Todd and I to stop talking, because Todd and I could talk forever. So if you have questions today, you just let me know by posting them over there in chat, and I'll make sure that I get them answered. So you don't need to wait until the end to share what's on your mind. All right. Cool.
I'm not sure. Am I sharing the right thing?
It shared before, and then it stopped.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, here we go. And maybe I'll make it a little bigger.
Yeah, zoom in a little bit. Perfect. Nice. Okay, so walk us through what we're seeing. We've got the sliders, and then we see the grouping down below for the periods. So yeah, walk us through this a little bit. First of all, it's beautiful. I love all these colors.
Thanks. So this is kind of the dashboard. So here you can set things like everything's a little slower when I'm sharing on Zoom. So sorry, things jump around a bit.
All good. And we can have a nice, easy process. It's all good.
Okay, it's still getting bigger. Okay. So here's this. Here are, as kind of a dashboard, sliders to set a monthly revenue growth rate, a monthly expense growth rate, a discount rate.
1 second. It for some reason, like, it keeps blacking out. Now it's back. So
okay.
I
think it was changing sizes on the screen.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Just say a prayer to the technology gods for me today, everyone.
So can you see it now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. So I just changed the discount rate for calculating NPV to by changing the slider here. And when you change any of these sliders, it changes the net result. So I wanted to have this dashboard so that you could see as you moved any of these parameters around, it would show you the total revenues, the net cash flow, and the net present value based on changing those parameters. So this all runs through the whole model in order to create those values.
Yeah.
But this way, as you change the sliders, you can see the result.
And those are just Canvas formulas, right? In the results summary, it's just formulas you added based on the inputs from the controls.
Yes.
Cool.
Right. Yeah, so those inputs go into the model and create the results. So if I change the discount rate here for net present value, let me see if this will calculate quickly enough for us. Yeah, you can see the net present value just changed right away, and that's running through the whole model in order to calculate that.
Very cool.
And then also, as part of the dashboard, is a cash flow summary. So just revenues, expenses, net cash flow, cumulative net cash flow. So this is showing your results in a summary format.
Nice. And I love it. We just group along the top for the period, and then group along the left for the type.
Exactly.
Nice.
And then I'm playing around. I created this chart. I'm not crazy about it, but anyway, it shows those four things: revenue, expenses, net cash flow, and cumulative net cash flow as a bar chart.
Yeah.
I want to play around with that a little bit more to see the best way to visually represent that, but that's what we have for now.
I love it. Deirdre just gave me a mind blown emoji. She's into it.
It's amazing.
Cool.
It's so funny, Todd, that you said, like, I'm not crazy about that chart, because I was like, ooh, this chart, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, no, it looks nice. I just want to make sure it's conveying the information as clearly as possible.
Sure. Yeah.
So
I love
so
the
then this
color
is
coding that you did between the conditional formatting and the chart. That
mhm.
was a really beautiful thing. Sorry to interrupt. Walk us
Thank
through
you.
this page here.
No, thank you. So now I just switched to the schedule, and this schedule is also tied into the model. So again, I repeat these results so that you can see them change as you change the schedule. So if the setup part of the schedule, we can shorten it here a little bit, then you can see that net present value, net cash flow all changed instantly. And that little change I just made is the 1 day project for my analysts. So
Todd, putting people out of work. But yeah, that power of that no matter where you are interacting with this model, it's going to change everywhere else. I love how you really thought through, where are people going to be interacting with this, and how can I make sure that if people are, oh, this schedule view really resonates with me, that it's not going to mess up everything for folks who are like, I want that dashboard and that bar chart view. So I love that there's the different kind of filters that you're seeing here and how you've thought that through. It's really, really well done. Nice.
And then the cash flow definitions. So this is where I define the how the cash flows are going to spread in each row of the model. So the sales is the green one is revenue, and so there's different kinds of cash flow rules, and based on the cash flow rules, it determines how the cash flow will spread. So if you're into this kind of modeling, you'll understand what I'm talking about. If you haven't had much experience, then it might be a little hard to grasp. But for example, but maybe something that's simple is you may have one kind of expense that the expense is a fixed amount. It's just a matter of how many months it's going to be spread over. In that case, your rule is just spreading a fixed amount evenly over a certain number of periods. And so that's one kind of rule. Another rule might be, you have property taxes, and you're going to pay those property taxes once a year or twice a year. No matter how long the project takes, you're going to keep paying those property taxes. So then the rule would be different every January, whatever, you have to pay the property taxes. So there's different kinds of ways to define cash flows. And I created a handful of rules for the prototype. For the full production thing, I'd be creating more rules and try to make them as customizable as possible, so the user can essentially create their own rules based on some building blocks.
Yeah.
So then go to the cash flow, and this is the detailed version of what was in the dashboard.
Oh, sure.
So it's revenues and expenses, but you get the line items of the revenue. And this is a simple model. There's just 7 different expense categories. In a typical real estate model, there could be 50 or 100 different lines.
Yeah.
So this is where you see the details of the cash flow model. And then to see how this was built. So this is using the grouping function so it groups the dates across the top. Then it groups the categories of cash flow, revenues, expenses, and then within that the detailed line items.
Yeah.
So
and just to pause here, Todd, there's one thing I just want to highlight for folks who maybe are coming from that Excel, more of a spreadsheet world to a database world. Something that's really interesting here with Todd and how Todd's done this is the cells here are not just locations, right? It's not just an empty place where Todd now wrote December 18 and then everything else is there. Each of these is actually a row of the expenditure or the value, and then what period it belongs to, what category it belongs to, et cetera. And then Todd's just able to manipulate it using grouping or using that timeline view or using the calendar view. So I think there's something really important here that we're not just doing location-based, cell A1. It's actually got a lot more rich information behind it. And I love, Todd, how you've done that converting here. And Todd, we actually have a really good question here from Bill. Also, hi, Bill. So good to have you here. Which is, this is a really good example of using Coda for dynamic modeling and why I believe there's a bright future for Coda. Yay. The challenge is implementing dynamic rules. So Todd, do you want to maybe just comment on the challenges of implementing these rules with lots of dependencies? Great question, Bill.
Yeah, so actually what's worked well with this approach is that essentially each cell is represented by a whole row. That means you can have all kinds of stuff in the row that defines that cell, and that makes it very easy to, for example, you could have a column in the row that defines each cell for exchange rate or for currency. And so if you wanted to change the whole thing from dollars to pounds, and you had that column for every cell to have put in a conversion factor, then you could just change the currency conversion factor, and the whole model would show you pounds instead of dollars, because each cell has a whole row of columns to define it. So let me show real quickly. Here's the cash flow model not grouped, so you can see what it looks like when the rows when it's all just exploded. So here each line is a cell, and so there's a lot of repetition because there's a lot of cells of widget sales, and they're all revenues, and so here's the date for each. In this column is the date for each cell, and then how it's going to be displayed. There's kind of a display version of the date, and then there's this is the amount, and then this is a factor. This is a growth factor over here that uses to calculate. Let me show the column headings real quick.
And while you're loading that up, Sylv has a really good question, which is, if I wanted to get one of these cells, then would I be able to get the row ID from the table to reference it? For example, would you be able to reference like February 19 in marketing and get the row ID too? So great question, Sylv. And one thing I want to highlight is that in Coda, any row that you add to a table is going to have a row ID. Now that means it's going to keep on going and going and going as you add rows. So if we have all of these rows here in Todd's table, and then I delete all of them, the next row that besides making Todd sad, the next row that I add will have a row ID of 65 and moving forward. So in this case, I actually encourage you to think about the row ID. You actually don't need that anymore because you can just ask for what you need using a filter. So I could say, hey, Coda, look at the cash flow model base, and then show me only the things that are part of February of 2019, and I want to sum the raw value. You can actually just ask for exactly what you're looking for instead of the row ID. The row ID is still something you can access, which is great for maybe making custom ID tags on things, but it's not something you need to use in the same way as Excel. Todd, is that kind of your experience, given kind of your feet in both worlds there?
Yes. So here, in order to organize the information, the date is crucial because that's what determines what your columns are ultimately going to look like when you group them, and then the item or the type of the actual cash flow item, and so then when you group them, you bring them together, and you don't need to use row IDs in order to do that, or in order to put them in the right order or anything like that.
Cool.
So anyway, you can see there's a bunch of factors that go into the ultimate value. So the value column here is what actually shows up in the cash flow tables, but you've got all these other things that you can use to define what that value is going to be, and you can build it. You can add as many different factors as you want, and every time you add a column with another factor, now every cell can have that parameter to be built into the value that's ultimately displayed as a value for that particular item and that particular date. So yeah.
We have another really good question from Bill, which is, if you have time, pun intended, can you comment on the challenges of creating time series predictions? Is that what caused you to make PAC instead of doing all of this in Coda?
Time series predictions. I'm not sure. I'm following what he means
Yeah.
by time series predictions.
Bill, feel free to post a little bit more detail there in chat, and I'm sure we can speak to it. Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
I mean, with a cash flow model like this is essentially a predictive model.
Mhm.
You're predicting what the cash flows are going to be period by period, and then you're summarizing the information to determine whether it's a good investment. Ultimately, you go back to the net present value and the IRR to see if it meets your investment criteria based on all the guesses that you're building into the model. It's all guesses, so from that standpoint, it's a predictive model in that sense. Every
Sure.
period is predictive, but I'm not sure
Mhm.
if that
Yeah, that's
gets at the
exactly what
question.
Bill was thinking about, is the challenges of really figuring out that future prediction. Mhm.
Yeah, and of course there's a whole that's a whole science to itself, and that's why and that's why having these different ways to spread the cash flows is important, because some things are very predictable, like with the property taxes. If you know the value of the property and when the property taxes are due, that line is pretty predictable. Your revenues, on the other hand, are a lot less predictable. And ultimately, you could have a lot of tables backing up your revenue line that are based on the things you found are relevant to predicting revenues. So that's how these models become very complex.
Cool. And then what actually then, this is a current doc that you've got, and I know you're building a pack for this in particular. So what then prompted you to try to build a pack instead of just using the doc?
Mm-hmm. So a couple of things. One, and actually the process I'm going through is, I'll come back to the dashboard view here. The process I'm going through is to, when I created this prototype initially, which was a couple of years ago, I just built in some very complex formulas, like to calculate net present value, to calculate a loan payment, those kinds of things. I just created my own formulas in Coda to do that. And so Coda doesn't have native financial formulas. It doesn't really have any native financial formulas. So I thought a nice step would be to create some kind of Excel-like financial formulas that can work in Coda. So actually, I've broken the process into two steps. And the first pack that I'll be releasing is I'm calling it Financial Essentials, and it'll essentially be formulas like to calculate a loan payment, to calculate other aspects of a loan, to calculate the interest rate if you know the other factors and so on, as well as to calculate net present value and internal rate of return, which I don't even have in this model because it would be hard to build. It would be hard to create a Coda function. I wouldn't even know how to do it, how to create a Coda function to calculate internal rate of return. It's an iterative kind of formula. And so I was able to create it in JavaScript and build it into a pack, but I couldn't even build it directly in Coda. So the Financial Essentials pack will give folks who want to do financial sort of stuff some basic things they can use, like if they have a series of cash flows, they could calculate a net present value or an internal rate of return on those cash flows. And all of that is needed for this time and money prototype, or for this time and money functionality. But so that's what's in the works first, and it hasn't been released yet, but it's very close. So
Yeah,
within a few weeks, that should be released.
cool.
Then the next step will be to build a pack. So that gives you actual formulas in Coda that you didn't have before, that are for financial purposes. And that's one cool thing about these custom packs. Up to until custom packs were possible, the packs that Coda provided were essentially integration packs, right? Right, Maria, that allow you to integrate in different kind of Google things, or with the Slack and all different, which are great. I use those tools all the time. But now with these custom packs, you can actually create packs of new formulas, and packs that eventually will be able to include templates for doing particular kind of tasks. So the packs that I'm creating are not integrations at all, although it's possible I'll include some integrations things like looking up interest rates and things like that. But
Ooh.
primarily, it's just creating new formulas, and then based on those formulas, creating some templates that let you do some more complex things like this time and money. So and then for time and money, that it will be built on the financial essentials pack, but then the idea would be to have a series of templates that are built into a pack that are kind of generic templates, because time and money is, the idea of it is to be a platform for building models. It's not one particular model, it's a platform so users can create their own models, and whether it's for real estate or for other kinds of investments or whatever it is. And so I want to have a series of templates that that folks can bring into their docs to allow them to do this kind of analysis.
Excellent. So connecting this, Bill, to your question, like what then made you go to custom pack land? It sounds like it's really like, okay, I can do this in Coda, but I can actually make a more, I can do it with less steps if I just write a pack to do these calculations given inputs, because otherwise we have to create it from scratch here. And that the pack then allows you to extend the powers of this doc and empower more people with that. Is that a fair statement, Todd?
Yeah.
Cool.
And depending on, with time and money, there may be different templates that are more appropriate for different kinds of modeling, and so anyway, you can kind of bring in the templates you need in order to build the kind of model you want to
Totally
build, so.
I love that. We have a question here from Gretchen, who is also a big finance nerd. Hey, Gretchen, so good to see you. Which is, Todd, what are your thoughts on how to connect the historical data to the projected data? So maybe I want to show the actual revenue for the years from 2015 to 21, and then have 2022 pick up. She loves this doc. So what are your thoughts on that, Todd? I am not a financial person, so
Yeah.
I hire people to be like, how does it work? So walk me through, Todd. How do you think about the answer to Gretchen's question here?
Yes, that would be a kind of, I would consider that kind of an advanced feature of time and money that maybe wouldn't be released with the first version, but conceptually it wouldn't be that hard to do, because each row can either be, you can have a column for each cell that indicates whether it's a historical or whether it's a projection. If it's historical, then it's a plug number. It's no longer depending on the cash flow formula. Instead, you're plugging in the actual number, and then it could be displayed somewhat differently so that you can tell the difference between actuals and projections. So I think it's a great feature. It's something, I considered that should be included in at least a future version of time and money.
Sweet. I was just answering a question over here. Ooh, good question, Sylv. Do we have a sense of how much faster, especially with larger Coda docs, using the custom pack is rather than going through all the Coda formulas? I have not done any testing myself, but the less steps that a piece of software needs to go through to do something, the faster it will be. So my assumption is that would increase the speed. But Todd, as you've been playing, have you noticed anything?
I haven't been able to build something complex enough using the formulas to really test that out. So I don't really have an answer for that.
Yeah, no. That's fine. Just thought I would check. But Sylv, it's like, how many steps is it going through, right? That's where the speed is impacted. Beautiful. Excellent, Todd. What then are your kind of future, we've started to take a look at some of the future aspirations, but kind of what's next for you? Where do you think you're going to go next? Lay it out for us a little bit.
Well, as you start working on building packs and stuff, you get so many new ideas that you're not quite sure what you're going to do next. But just along the line of time and money, one idea that I mentioned is probably building into the financial essentials pack, which time and money would sit on top of. Interest rate lookups, so you could look up what was LIBOR on a certain date in the past, or what is the current LIBOR rate, and then that might you might use that to plug into your model. So some things like that. With cash flow modeling, there are, in addition to what Gretchen mentioned, there are some other things that can be added. Being able to analyze debt and equity financing in the model, and building that right into the model. That would probably be the next big one that would be important to add. And then eventually doing scenario modeling, so you could click a few parameters and you could keep track of multiple scenarios. So when you're changing those sliders and so on, you're not just changing it for good, but you can create a set of different scenarios that you can compare to each other. That would be another major kind of step in the development of time and money. And then beyond that, I keep thinking of just ideas for other packs related to finance that are because I've been involved with real estate for a good part of my my career. I think about what real estate agents need in order to present things to clients, and how custom Coda docs could be great for helping clients find a home and that kind of thing. So that's another whole, it's finance related, but it's another whole direction. So but anyway, I think I better stay focused for a little bit here.
You got to stay focused because Gretchen wants this pack that you're making. But two things that I really love about what you've just shared with us, Todd, is number one, the journey, right? Of like, I started with a doc. Ooh, maybe I want to make a pack to help me with some of these calculations. Oh, maybe now I can create a doc that uses that pack in a new way. And then I can add other packs to this doc to like have it be something new. So it's like the idea was born over here, and then it's shifted and grown through all of these different ways. And I love how it's helping you conceptualize like, oh, new opportunities, like, oh, now this might be possible, which is just very inspiring to me. The other thing that I just want to highlight for folks is, Todd has done a ton of really great work on this doc, but notice how Todd keeps coming back to what are the ingredients that he needed to be able to calculate various things, right? It's not, oh gosh, I need to write this pack, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, I need these inputs so that I can put them into this little thing and have it come out differently. And I love that you took the ingredients of not only here in your doc of, okay, what do I need in each row so I can look at things in certain ways. All right, what kind of calculations do I need to do, and what are the inputs in that? And then I can go ahead and move forward. So just remember, everybody, that the key to solving a problem is to first figure out what are the ingredients that you have to work with before you start cooking in the kitchen. Yeah. And once you know the ingredients you have, then it's much easier to put them together and combine them. Excellent. Todd, as you were building this doc, were there any surprises that came up as you were starting to build, or the pack, right? Any surprises in your making process?
Well, in building the initial doc, the initial prototype, I think the main surprise was just if you think about it enough, Coda, and combine the different tools that Coda makes available to you, you can create some pretty amazing things. The value of Coda is leveraged by every tool that it has. So and actually I think time and money is a good example of leveraging a lot of Coda tools into doing something really powerful that is even harder to do in something like Excel. And so I wasn't sure when I started if doing what time and money does was even possible, and I was pleasantly surprised at how powerful the tools were to be able to help me to create this. So I think that was the biggest surprise.
And if you could hop in a time machine with me, we go back to the beginning of when you started building this. Is there anything you would do differently if given that other chance to go?
Well, when I built this, I was getting it ready to show to somebody, and so I built it actually quite quickly. So now when I look back at some of the formulas and so on, and I was just learning Coda. I was much more of a neophyte when I first built this. So I look at some of the formulas now, and I'm appalled at how messy they are, and I've learned since then how to refactor things so that the code can be a little cleaner and probably run a little bit quicker and things like that. And including with a lot of help from Maria, by the way. She runs a great course on Coda, plus all her videos on Coda are very helpful. I recommend those. But
I'll give you your $5 after the fact, Todd. Thanks for saying.
but so anyway, and I plan to go back and review the whole thing and really refactor this whole thing before it's released publicly. What you're looking at now is still kind of the prototype version. I've done a little bit of cleanup, but I really want to refactor everything. So so we'll see what that turns out. What that turns, and also to make it, to clean it up, and also to make it more flexible for the user, because I do want it to be a platform and not just a way to create one single kind of model.
Yeah, I always love too, when building a doc, is to remind myself that everything's editable for a reason, right? You're not stuck forever. And I love revisiting docs that I built in a fury, like, okay, I'm going to do this and this, and then go, oh, wow, now that I can see it, oh, I want to just tighten that up. Oh, I don't need this extra table, and finding those opportunities to polish and, get out our sandpaper, right? I love that. And so no shame in revisiting what we've done. And I often find that going back to my older docs helps me actually get better at building, to be like, oh, that's interesting. I took that whole route, but there's actually another way. And always asking myself, oh, I wonder if there's a better way to do this. I wonder if there's something that I can try. So that's super inspiring to me, Todd.
And also Coda's added a lot of new features since I built this. So I want to make sure I'm taking advantage of what Coda does now. So
totally. Well, and that also, every year I have a tradition of rebuilding this doc that I use to run my life. And I love revisiting it once a year because it lets me go, wow, okay, now canvas columns are a thing. How does that change how I can put things together? I'm like, oh, we have reactions now. I don't need these buttons anymore. I can actually adjust things a bit. So I love doing that revisiting. I also love this. Bill says to have innovators regret, you must first innovate. And I think definitely you have definitely innovated here. We have a really good question here, which is, not a question, just a comment from Jean-Pierre. Hey, Jean-Pierre, good to see you. Which is, this would be so valuable to the community because it shows us all sorts of options. We have a lot of finance nerds out on our community, which is fantastic. Also, folks want to know, Todd, where they can get this pack when it's done. So I would highly recommend maybe add it to the thread in the community for this webinar when it's ready, and we can have that there.
And the prototype itself can be shared right now. I don't know if you...
I popped the link over in chat. So folks, you can grab the prototype right there and be able to play with it and make a copy and see the calculations and everything. So the doc is available now, but the people are like, give me those finance formulas. Come on, Todd.
Should be soon.
Soon. I know, no pressure, Todd, but we all want it. So my last question before we open up for just general Q&A is, what is your advice to other folks who are thinking about maybe converting a doc into a pack, or starting pack building for the first time, or starting to play in this finance space with Coda? What advice do you have for them?
Wow. Well, one is that, like I mentioned, I'm not a deep programmer. I have not done never done programming professionally or anything like that. I've never really worked heavily with the mod. I didn't know any JavaScript. I'd seen JavaScript, but I didn't know any JavaScript. So I think the first thing is not to be intimidated by the fact that you're going to be playing a little bit with JavaScript. I did do a quick Code Academy. I did the basic level of Code Academy in JavaScript just to get the basics. But Coda's Pack Studio makes it very easy for folks like me who are not programmers to build packs. And so much of the stuff is, I mean, you can add the icon that's going to go with the formula and all that. Everything is very automated. It packages it. The Pack Studio packages the whole thing for you. And so I found that fun to work with.
Cool.
I did they take you through a little Hello World pack creation, and I was just amazed. I created a pack in just 5 minutes. So the first thing is not to be intimidated by. I mean, it helps if you've had a little kind of sense of coding, but you don't need to be an expert programmer to get into this and build cool stuff. So I think that's the first thing. I tend to like to look at the big picture first, because of working on app design and so on. Just think about what the need might be. If you're trying to create something that not just for yourself, but for that you want other people to use. Just to think about how to generalize your idea so that it's useful to the most people. And so I like to spend a lot of time designing before building. That's kind of the way I've learned through the years. And Maria's good at teaching this too, so you can learn from her on that. So yeah, just think it through. Think what people need, and then dive into the tools and start seeing what you can build. Because after I built the Hello World, then I thought, well, let me build my first financial formula, and it really, in a few hours I had it done, and then the other ones took a lot less time. So it's really fun. It's very rewarding when you actually pull your own formula into your doc that you created. It's pretty amazing.
Like, that's mine. And, I think you bring up a really good point, Bill, that everybody here, if you've been starting to work with Coda already, you've got a leg up, right? Because JavaScript, oh, that sounds really intimidating. But if you've written any of the Coda formulas, you've already started to do things in that same JavaScript syntax. So it should be pretty familiar. And we've done that really deliberately. And I love, Bill, the big piece of thing that I just want to highlight with a big neon sign is that the best way to build your first pack is to have a problem you want to solve. Because if you have a problem you want to solve and people you want to solve it for, even if that's just yourself, then you'll know, great, this is what I'm trying to do. And you have something concrete that you can start to apply to. So you can figure out what kind of ingredients you're going to need, right? If I know I want to cook this is what it always comes back to for me, food analogies. If I want to cook a streusel coffee cake, now I know I'm going to need cinnamon, I'm going to need sugar, I'm going to need some nuts. Oh, but my friend has a nut allergy, so I want to have no nuts in this one. And I need flour, right? Whereas if I'm like, I want to make dessert, it's probably going to be a lot harder for me to figure out the ingredients that I need to be able to build something. But if I know what I want and who I want to build it for, it all of a sudden gives me a much more targeted way of approaching the problem. And all of you already have that leg up. Excellent. Perfect. Oh yeah, and Bill is also correct that if you're starting to struggle with building your first pack, Codans are here. Like, we have a whole company that's ready and waiting to support you. So just let us know what's on your mind. We have a good question here from Scott, which is, so there are formulae that you can put in a pack that you can't put in a doc. So here, Scott, what Todd is talking about is when it comes to building a pack, there are lots of different ways that you can build that end product. It could be a sync table from another tool. It could be a formula that you're building. So Todd has made a pack with just some financial formulas that he can now go equals Todd's cool formula in Todd's doc and be able to put it through there. So there's a lot of a spectrum. And in this case, Todd has made some really cool, is in the process of making some really cool formulas that could be added. So I think that's something also kind of fun about our pack work, is that it doesn't have to be a big beefy pack. It can be, oh, I've just made this special calculation, which lets me do what I need to do.
And there are some formulas that I'm building in the financial essentials pack. You could build them in Coda, and they'd be big long formulas in Coda, or you can create a real simplified version of it that uses JavaScript in order to do the calculations. And so for the user, it becomes really simplified. And there's others, like I mentioned, the IRR one, you can't do it in Coda. You have to do it in JavaScript, but then you can create a formula in Coda that brings that into Coda. So
yeah.
So there are formulas you can't build in Coda at all, but you can do through the pack.
Yeah, exactly. And just to reaffirm, Sylv, integrating graphs and visuals. We have a couple packs that have been built that are all about visualizing data. So that's some of the things, also putting in new libraries. So everything that you're talking about is possible with Pack Studio. Yeah. So we have just another minute here. Folks are super excited about this, Todd. Thank you so much for sharing your brilliance, your creativity, and just your all around good fun here. I always love when we get to sit down and chat. And also I feel really inspired by your work. So with our last minute, if people want to learn more about your building or find you, what are anything you want to plug?
Well, actually, let me just give my email address. If
Great.
anybody wants to keep track of what I'm doing, I'll be happy to put you on a list and keep in touch with you. So that's Todd, T-O-D-D, at docplus.io.
Ta-da! I think I got it right.
That's it. Yeah.
Perfect. Excellent. So if you want to stay in touch with Todd, there you go. Todd also has a maker profile out on the Coda gallery, so you can search for him out there. That's where that prototype link is. And Doc is also, you're now a doc to me. Todd is also on our Coda community as well. So thank you all so much for your time and your attention today. Have fun building, get inspired, start to think about what kind of packs you might want to build, and just know that you can always get in touch with us, the Coda champions, via the little learn and help in your Coda account. And you can also just get in touch with us directly via email. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Thank you, Todd.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.